Hello, and welcome back to our blog Sports Hit. For this week's blog entry here at Sports Hit, we will be doing our very first podcast. I'm Stephen Kwan, and I'll be going over last week's topic over technology and how it's been integrated into our social worlds and the emergence of a new era in sport. Once again, our blog's purpose is to discuss how sports is evolving and how it will continue to change and grow, affecting the culture of sport. I brought here today a special guest named Elizabeth Bass. Please say hi and how you give consent to being on the podcast.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Vass, and I consent to having my voice and my information that I give on this podcast.
So, the topic we are going to be going over today is how technology has immersed itself into our daily lives in regards to our social economic statuses and how technology has influenced and dramatically changed how we play, interact, watch, and participate in sports. With that being said, since technology has become such an ever-present aspect of life, does it mean all social classes benefit from its advances? It seems to me that the upper and middle class segment of the population reaps the benefits of technology to its full potential, whereas the lower and maybe poverty level classes uh, don't quite receive the same benefits. Whether it be technology that's capable of healing a sport injury more effectively and efficiently, or technology that increases one's skill in a sport, I feel as though the difference in benefit from the upper middle class and the lower class is just very drastic. What do you think, Elizabeth, on this subject?
I would agree with you. I believe that children who, say, for example, grow up in an upper to middle class household have more benefits and more resources that could be provided to them, and especially regarding like technology, game wise, just anything that would help benefit them in the long run. And I believe that children in and families that are in the lower middle to lower class would struggle a little bit more to be able to keep up with technology, and seeing as to how it changes so often. You could have the newest phone one year, and then say a few months later something else will come out, and you have technically the outdated version of it, and not everybody has those resources to keep upgrading every time something new comes out. And I think it really affects the culture, and how certain families are able to just continue into society. Some kids I've seen some kids at school get bullied because their technology is outdated, and I've seen some kids are more popular because they have the newest stuff, and so everybody wants to be their friend. And I think it, excuse me, I think it really just affects everybody in their everyday life, especially in sports and in class and school, especially laptops, iPads. Me growing up, I'm in my mid 20s, and we never had Wi-Fi when I was younger in our schools. We never had laptops. We never had iPads. We only had the computer lab, and so we would go to computer lab, do a project, and then go back to our classroom. But nowadays, it's standard to have Wi-Fi at school so that students can work off their laptops, can work off their iPads, and students are allowed to have a structured device time where they're able to learn from using technology. And so I think it's really changed a lot over time. And I think the classes of where you're at and your family is at really affects how you relate to technology, and what experiences you were given as a child.
Right. And I agree with that. It seems like what you just said means it just seems to me that like technology has just been such a big factor in life now that it's almost normal to have all these things, or and if you don't, it's almost like you're handicapped in life. Um, would you say or agree that well, what are your thoughts on how technology can play a factor in sports in the sense that if you were exposed to more technology, do you think as an athlete you would be more inclined to succeed?
I think it depends on how you approach what type of technology it is. Say if you were had cable as a child and you were able to watch more games on TV, and you're able to your parents would watch them with you, and they even if say if you're a diehard Aggie fan, and your parents made it a mission and a tradition to watch all of the football games on the TV. Obviously, that would probably be something you would remember growing up, and maybe that would help you become a stronger Aggie because you watch those games on the TV. Versus, say, if we're gonna follow the rivalry, a Longhorn family who was not able to have cable, and so they could only catch the games on, like, say, public TV, or say read the newspaper, or they would have to talk word from mouth by mouth, be like, oh yeah, did you this person number blah 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 had a great touchdown, and then they made a play, and that child who was not given that technology and that opportunity to watch the game, they might not be able to relate to sports as well later on unless they had that drive to learn about it on their own. And I really think that brings up another topic, is like, children nowadays are very resourceful. And so even if they are not afforded those opportunities at home, um, with technology, I think that they will find a way. And at the end of the day, technology is just, if anything, it just makes it easier for you to access sports. But I don't think it'll be very detrimental. If you're really truly someone who loves sports, you'll make it happen.
Okay, so it seems like in my opinion at least, I feel like technology has created such a large impact. There must be some big changes and moves in the sport world we know today. I mean, back in the day before the first television, the only way to watch a game is to either physically be there or listen through a radio. Before the radio, the only way to hear or watch the game is really by word of mouth, and to be physically there. And how dependable is the content through the word of mouth? All in all, I feel like the world of sport has evolved along with the evolution of technology. And to follow up what you said, what you mentioned earlier, Elizabeth, I feel like in this particular situation, I believe that technology for sure plays a factor on the chances or the chance of success of the particular athlete. Um, the way we view and analyze sports now is a whole new beast. And today, one of the things that on the podcast that I really want to bring to y'all's attention is how sports can be viewed and played on an entirely whole new level. And I think that level is esports. So the esport industry is projected to cross the $1 billion threshold in 2019, with revenues projected to hit $1.1 billion. So this industry of esports is definitely growing, and it's growing really fast. The significant growth in projected revenue makes sense with all the groundbreaking new developments of technology that's been introduced this year. For example, League of Legends is as popular as it's ever been. With the introduction of the 2017 World Champion Finals, it more than doubled its unique viewers year over year. Not only that, another game that's very popular is Overwatch, and an Overwatch League has actually been created, replicating traditional sport teams such as basketball, football. They each have their own hometown, like the Houston Rockets, San Antonio Spurs, etc. The Overwatch League actually has sponsors just like them, like T-Mobile and Toyota, sponsoring these teams. And I feel as though these esports, like the aspects of esports, is just replicating and emulating what traditional sports is. What do you think, Elizabeth, that about this topic, where just like how much esports has grown, and how far it can go in terms of technology?
Thank you. I think esports has grown drastically, like you said, over the past few years, and I can only see it growing so many more ways. As children are getting older and technology is becoming more available to them, I feel like they're only going to help enhance the world of esports. Um, I see 7, 8 year olds now with iPhones, and I look at them, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Is that your phone? And they tell me yes. and they're playing. I used to play with. I used to have crayons and drawing paper, and I would bring my markers out to restaurants, and now I see little kids playing on gaming apps on their phones and just playing those games that you have to keep playing in order to level up. And it just amazes me because of the change in generations, depending on how how technology has advanced so far, that we're able to place those little games and gadgets into one little rectangle, and you can carry that anywhere as long as you have a data connection or Wi-Fi. And to me, that was just unfathomable as a child because we never had that opportunity. And I think that this generation, the ones that have the iPhones and the iPads at their young age, they're the ones that are going to take esports to a whole new level. And we don't even know how, we can't even imagine how they're going to evolve the world of esports, but I can't see it regressing in any way possible. If anything, I think it's going to be just as big as regular sports, just because it's just such a big growing industry. And sports is I see sports as a business. Even though the business and the industry started because of the love of the games, I think that esports is similar in the fact that everybody loved this game and everybody loved playing sports on, like, games online, and now it's just time to make a business out of it.
Yeah, so you say like how you agreed on how esports and traditional sports are very similar now, and just like how they're both businesses and how they're all just so big and I guess the so accessible to everybody. I guess um, I a problem with this is that a problem that I've noticed is that lots of people disagree with esports because traditionally people wouldn't think, oh, esports, it's a sport. People think football, basketball, like something like active, I guess, is what's considered a sport. Um, do you think esports can be considered a sport? I mean, the U.S. government already classifies professional gamers as athletes. So what
I
do you think?
I think that's a pretty heavy debate. I can see both sides. But at the end of the day, I feel like you are athletes, like physical athletes. Like sports, football. Say a football player versus an esports player. At the end of the day, they're exerting different um, energies. They're using different parts of their bodies. You know they're using different types of energy to complete their task at hand. But at the end of the day, they are still completing a task that is for other people's entertainment, and they're paid professionally to do it. There's people that argue that cheerleading isn't a sport, or dancing isn't anything that's, even though it has physical exertion, that it doesn't really count as anything but just a hobby. But at the end of the day, the people who argue for it is the fact that they're doing that something that they love, and they're competing against other people. And I think that competition in itself can really bring in that aspect of what a sport really is. And I think it's unfair to think of people who don't, say, you might not sweat as much or you might not exert as much energy physically, to not see them as athletes, because they're also exerting mental energy and their hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that because uh, I mean we're gamers ourselves, and I feel as though with all these advancements of technology, just having your own personal laptop or PC at home, it really just allowed or opened up doors for people like us or people who take these esports very seriously, and it just gives them that opportunity to be an athlete, a professional athlete, whereas they might have not been able to before when technology hasn't been this, I guess, rich. Um, Now it gives them the opportunity to compete at a professional level. Esports is just a prime or a great example of how technology has created a whole new avenue of the sport world. And honestly, technology has just been a catalyst in the sport world to ensure that sports and society are aligned in the sense that they're continually growing. And that about wraps it up for this week's podcast. I just want to say, give a special thanks to Elizabeth for coming on to this week's show, and thank you for tuning in to Sports Hit, and I'll see you guys next week.